Good morning, folks. Welcome to another round of Coffee and Questions. What are we going to talk about today? I'm going to show you in a second the finished product when I put that railroad tie through a piece of wood, and I sanded it, I burned it, I applied dye to it, then I started putting the top finish over it, and I showed you kind of after one or two coats, but I've gotten farther along with it now, and the finish, well, I'll be done with it in a day or so. And it'll be ready to do whatever I'm going to do with them. But somebody had made the comment, well, did you just take your welding torch and you use it to burn the wood? No, but you can do that. I would be a little more careful. I mean, now what I used is I used this. I used the Burns-O-Matic. I think I showed you in the video itself when I did it, but I used this Burns-O-Matic torch. Now this is the TS4000. Now they make, another one that's one up from this. I didn't feel I really needed it. This one was a discount at the time on Amazon, so I bought it, and it has a propane tank on it. This is what I used because I could hold it right here, and I had much better control over what I'm doing. So if you're interested, stick with me, and I'm going to take you through the different steps that I do to get it to the way that it looks. There's a little bit of labor involved, but I'm going to take you step by step. And so you'll probably notice the cuts in the video because I'm going to try to, keep it shortened as much as I can. So I want to start off, I'll show you the other ones in a few minutes, but what you want to do is you want to start off with a scrap piece of wood. Now, wood selection, depending on what I'm doing, becomes important. If I'm out at the big box, I just don't grab something and go. I take a look at that pine or the Doug fir or whatever I'm looking at. If I know that this is the kind of project I'm doing, let's say we're going to do coat hanger project, for a bathroom or something, like that. And I take a look at the grain of the wood. First of all, I want it as flat and as straight as I can. Did a video on how you can pull lumber and take a look at it. But let's say I run across something and it's got some knots and it's got some little bird eye things and the patterns and the grain and stuff. I know in my mind that would come out probably fairly spectacular by the time I was done, just because of the character that's in the wood. So wood selection is kind of important. If you're doing something that's not so artistic or whatever, may not matter to you. So let's say that you selected the wood. I'm going to use this right here. This was a scrap failed project that I did on the first go around before I found a better way of doing the railroad ties. Anyway, I've sanded this right here and I've brought it up to 220, okay? So what did I start off with? Well, this was really messed up. So I used 120 grit. If I had to start with 80, I would have. I would have went 80, 120, 150, 220, 320, and so on. Like I say in my videos, it's my sanding protocol. It's what works for me. I started anyway on this with 150, 120, 150. Then I went to 220, and I used my random orbital on this just to do a demo. Nothing wrong with that. Turns out perfectly fine. Now, what you can do is I did here is I used 150 on the end grain, and then I came up to 220 here. Okay, there's a reason. To me, people don't sand the end grain when they do a lot of these projects, and I think you should, because it really adds to a nice finish when somebody picks it up and looks at it. All right, so anyway, here we are, and I've cleaned this off. So we're ready now to do what we'll call the burning part, which is called Shou-Sugi-Ban, and I just call it wood burning, but it has this oriental name, so Shou-Sugi-Ban, yeah, all right, something like that, right? All right, that's not what I call it, but anyway, that's what they call it in the art world, I suppose. Wood burning. All right, so I'm going to take you through what I do, and I'm going to show it to you here in real time. So I'm going to figure out the angle of the camera for a minute. So I got my wood, I got my torch, ready to go. I'm going to start with actually the end grain. You don't have to, you can start anywhere you want. What I like to do with this is I touch it lightly. Okay, so I'm going to show this to you in real time. Okay, and you can see how I burned that. And it does depend. I mean, I don't get up super close and I don't get way back here. But the farther back I am, when I start to burn this, I start burning it lightly. And keep your hand moving in about the same movement, okay? Just back and forth like this. And then I look at it, so well, I'm light in some areas, or I'm too dark in some areas. It's okay if you're a little dark. I'm gonna tell you how to lighten it in a bit. But I can light this again. And I can make it as uniform as I want just by playing around with the distance and just hit and miss and whatever. And I get this fairly uniform. Now, sometimes what I do is I burn harder these edges, okay? And I'll show you here in just a sec. And what it does, it gives a little bit of a picture frame effect. And then you say, well, I got too much over here and it turned darker. It's okay. All you gotta do, okay, make the rest of it darker. Make it uniform. Now, we're gonna do this in a minute. You can take and char this and make it totally black. I can leave it alone like it is, and I can go back over with 220 and I can sand this. And I'm going to do that for just a couple of seconds and I'll show you why. I'll be right back. Here's my random orbital. I got the sandpaper. Here's the project. I can lighten this up. Now, I went a little bit longer than I probably should have. What are we going to do now? Well, we just reburn it again. So let's do it. Okay, there you go. I lightened it up way too much. And you go, damn, it's okay, we're learning, right? Don't let these other people, fool you, okay? This is all learning. Once you do this a few times, you get used to moving this at a distance and you get used to a uniform movement. This burning is going to become consistent. So, well, here we go. And there you go. And it's consistent. So, what are we going to do next? Now, I can do a multitude of things while we're talking. I can sand this, and I can make this pattern real light, and then I can go apply stain, dye. I can leave it alone. I can put a finish on it. You can do whatever you want if that's what you want to do. Or I can take it a step farther and say, well, because we're just playing around and I'm trying to figure out what I want for this project that's going to look good, what happens if we really burn the heck out of it to the point of charring it? So there you go. Now I could have charred this and burned it more, but like I said, we're playing around, we're having fun. Okay, so now we've already decided one way to deal with this is to sand it. But now I've charred this up pretty good. What are some other ways? I'm going to show you. Hang on. Okay, now let's talk about things that you can do and we'll play around. I can use I could use a paintbrush, but that's not really going to give me any effect really, but you can. I can use, this is a bristle brush, but it's not a real stiff one, and I can start going like this. You say, well, it's really not removing a whole lot. There, I brushed it a few times away from the camera. Okay. It does give it some character in the wood grain, and it does start to lighten it and make some light spots. Nothing wrong with using the bristle brush. I can use a stiffer bristle brush. Let's try it on the end. Not much of a difference because we charred it. It's okay. I can use a real stiff bristle brush. Let me get up here. Now you can see the difference on the upper part from using a stiff bristle brush. And a bristle brush isn't going to damage the grain or anything like that if you happen to hit it in the wrong direction or anything like that, or it'll minimize it. But you can see the difference. There's the charred still. There's where we lightened it up with a bristle brush. Harbor Freight Special, I can use small bristle brushes to get into detailed areas, okay, and lighten them that way. I can use a wire brush. I can use brass, or I can use just the regular, scrub brushes that have the metal. But this is a brass one. I'm not sure where. Oh, here it is. Harbor Freight Specials, brass, steel, okay? Is there a difference on this end grain project? Not really, okay, but I'll show you. Let me get up close. Now, on this side is where I used that wire brush. This side I used the nylon one. When I use the wire brush, it gets down and it kind of takes out grooves in between these rings, and it gives it a nice textured feel. It's pretty pronounced. I mean, you can actually hear. See. Okay. And you can see here it actually lightened it up even more than the nylon. These are all tools, I mean, that you can use, I mean, in lightening up, the burning of this wood. Somebody made the comment you could even put like a wire wheel on your drill press and do it that way. You could, I don't disagree. It's not a method that I would do. If you feel that you're going to need to wire brush a much larger kind of a project, you can put it in a hand drill that's got a variable speed would be my suggestion, so you got more control. You could use, a cordless that you have laying around, and I mean, you usually have variable speeds on them now. I'm all about, controlling stuff when it comes to this kind of aggressive sanding, aggressive lightening, and, grain enhancement. So, yeah, I wouldn't use the drill press to give you an answer. Somebody said, well, when you're sanding, I mean, how do you know, when you're done with one grit, going on to another? Well, what I do is I have, like I keep saying in all my videos, I've got a pair of inexpensive dollar store reading glasses. I think they're 2 times. I keep them out here in the shop and I put them on, and when I'm done sanding with, let's say 80 grit, and I go to 120, and I've been sanding with 120, I blow it off, I look at it. Are all of those 80 grit marks gone? Okay, then I can go to 150 or, the next grit and so forth. And I'm always looking to make sure I've removed the previous marks. That works. One of the worst things is to go to apply a finish and find out that you've still got some of the more coarse grit sanding marks. It's not impossible to fix, but you're going to have to start your sanding protocol pretty much over. So, all right, so let's move on. Let's talk about what about the end grain part, or I'm sorry, we did the end grain. What about the rest of this? How did you do it? Well, I did it the same way. Now, I'm going to step away from the camera and I'm going to use the torch and I'm going to come over and I'm going to bend this. Now, I start on the edge, across the edge, and I'll probably turn it like this and do the other edge. I always do the edges first. Just habit. There's no magic to it. Then I start doing the long grain part of this, and I use pretty much long, consistent strokes up and down with the torch. Other people just jump in, burn the daylights out of it, and go, there you go, and throw a finish on it. Like I said, that's not the way that I do it. Try to have a little bit more control over the burning of this and keep things consistent. So let's try it. Here we go. Okay, now you can see I'm a little light in some of these areas. So let's go back. I can keep my torch a little farther away. That looks pretty good. That looks a little more consistent. So does that. Okay, now I intentionally made a couple mistakes. Let's see if we can find them, okay? It's not a big deal. I can correct these. I can correct them the same way I showed you on the end grain. So let's take a look and say, well, this I was pretty consistent, but up here kind of got a little bit darker. You know, now I can do that the rest of the way around this and create that frame or that bordering. That looks pretty good. But here you can see where I didn't. I couldn't get it to come to that uniform burn, and I kept at it until pretty soon it really kind of darkened it too much. No big deal. I can put 320 or a 400 grit disc, or even a 220, just be careful because you'll start to lighten this up fast even with 220. I can put a fine grit wheel on that random orbital sander. I can start gently touching these areas. I can go over the whole thing. I can get it nice and smooth. I can get it smoother than the 220 if that's what you're after, and it'll lighten this up. Okay, then I can just come back over it a second time with the torch. The comment was, what if you screw it up a second time? Sand it and go over it a third time. Sand it and go over a fourth, a fifth. So whatever you got to do. It doesn't matter if you mess up, okay? Get over it. Screw up. Who cares? You're going to learn every time you pick up that torch and apply it to this wood. You're going to learn how far away to stay. You're going to learn your movement, how quick or how slow you should be. Are you going too fast? Are you going too slow? What are you doing? And you're going to learn from practicing and doing it. And once you got this and you got it sanded, like I said, you are ready to put the finish on it that you want. Now, here's a couple of cautions, and I've seen some of the YouTube videos on this, and I'm just telling you because I've been down this path before. If you char this real black like we had it, make it really charred like it was in a fire, which can look pretty cool, I mean, depending on the project, I suppose. You say, okay, I'm ready to finish it. Okay, what are you going to put on it? Well, I'm going to put a clear finish on it. Okay. And so what are you going to do? I mean, so what are you going to choose? Because you want a good finish on there, and it's going to have to be kind of thick. My suggestion, my way of doing it, and what I found works for me, is use something that's in a can, whether you use Helmsman or you use some kind of, spar varnish, or even if you're going to use lacquer or whatever. Now, I've done it two ways. I've applied a sealer first when it's super charred. Actually, even when it's not and it's like this, let's say this was finished the way we wanted it, I apply a sealer. Now, a lot of times I'll use lacquer sanding sealer, but there are other sealers available in the stores. There's nothing wrong with them. It doesn't matter. Use the sealer that you have that's compatible with the finish that you're going to use. I put a sealer on it, I let it dry, and then I go ahead and I start putting my finish on there. But for the real super charred, you want a good thick finish, or sit there and spray it like 6, 8, 10 times. I don't know, because I've never done it by rattle can. But you could, yes. But rattle can is usually much thinner than what comes out of a can. So let's say that you used gloss clear lacquer, okay? And you can actually paint that on with a brush. Now, lacquer is going to dry incredibly fast, so your working time is incredibly quick. One way around that is, of course, to use a little bit of lacquer thinner, but you want a good finish. So let's say that you used something that was a polyurethane. You're going to have plenty more working time. It's probably better to use. I can brush it on in nice long strokes, let it dry. I can do it again, let it dry. I can do 3, 4, 5 coats, because when it's charred up like that, it's going to help also glue and hold it in there. When it's not charred, it's a lot easier to finish. The charring, when it's super charred, a little bit more, because you really need to apply a good top coat finish. Okay. Any other questions off of the forum? Let me take a quick look. I'll be right back. What do I think? Why didn't I use something like made from General Finishes? I have General Finishes varnish, and I have their seal coat. There was no reason. I mean, it just depends on what I have on hand. I have Deft sanding sealer. I've got Deft lacquer. I've got Rust-Oleum 2x, ultra gloss. I do have a couple of cans of the General Finishes. I've got linseed oil. I've got all kinds of weird things out here. I mean, it's just a preference thing when you get to that point. I'm not going to tell you how to finish it because there's so many finishes out there and there's so many different ways. I mean, I could probably, you want to talk about content for YouTube, all you got to do is start the topic on finishes. It's like enormous. I mean, how many different ways and how many different types of finishes there are. Anyway. Any other questions? Look more distressed. Yeah, I can take a 4.5-inch angle grinder with a flat disc. I can hit it here, here, there, everywhere. I can hit it with a chain. I can hit it with the edge of a ball peen hammer or any kind of a hammer. I can do all kinds of things, and I can come back and burn over that, and that's going to give it that antique-y kind of distressed look. Sure, you could do it that way. I didn't on this. This was just a sample and a kind of a how-to from my standpoint on how I do this wood burning. There's a little bit, everybody thinks, well, there's no technique to it, you just pick up a torch and burn. Well, there is, if you want to actually add a little bit of artistic flair to it. You got distance, you've got speed, you've got light burning, medium burning, you've got that charred look. I mean, there's lots of different ways to do it, and you'll get used to it just by holding the torch, like I said. Okay, I don't see a whole lot more on the forum. I didn't leave it up that long. I mean, it was just a comment. I just happen not to agree with somebody that did a video going, hey, look, you just have an oxyacetylene torch, fire it up and get it super hot and just burn the hell out of it and then just hit the whole thing with a wire brush. That's not all there is to this. There's a little bit of an artistic thing to this. Like I said, if you feel here with the wire brush, it takes out wood that's in between this grain pattern. Maybe you didn't want that. Maybe you want to keep it nice and smooth like this. So when somebody picks it up, it's nice to touch it. It's not like, this real coarse grain. Maybe that's what you wanted. Maybe you wanted the coarse grain and char the hell out of it. I don't know. The decisions are yours. It's fun to do. It's easy. It's quick to do. All right, I'm the home handyman anyway, and that's how you do the Shou-Sugi-Ban wood burning technique. I just call it wood burning. All right, folks, have a great day. I will see you on the next video. Click subscribe. Don't forget, I've left anything that you need, including the torch, down in the comments. If you think that it's something that you want to buy and try, it is not expensive. These are not expensive tools. See you on the next video. Have a great day. Bye-bye.